You may not know it yet, but buried deep inside the new definition of hemp from the government shutdown is a new loophole. Congress finally rewrote the federal definition of hemp, the definition that controls the entire billion-dollar cannabinoid industry. And they say they closed the loopholes. They say they fixed the intoxicating hemp. They say they restored order. But when you actually read what they passed, something presents itself. We're going to go over it, and we're going to show you why this loophole is good for growers, but bad for gas stations. So there's a chance that it sticks around for at least another 7 years like the last one. And we're going to unpack this together piece by piece because the truth is pretty wild. It's hidden in plain sight, and the consequences are going to shape cannabis for the next decade. But before we dive in, hit like and subscribe, not just because it helps the channel, although it absolutely does, but because every time you do, a prohibitionist from Sam cries a little bit. All right, now let's slow this down because Congress passed something complicated, technical, and written in the most classic, I didn't read the bill, but I voted for it anyway to get the government open type of way. Once you understand what they changed, you can see what they forgot, and what they forgot is the whole story. Let's start with what Congress thought it was doing. The public message was simple. We are shutting down intoxicating hemp products. No more Delta-8 gummies at gas stations, no more THCA flower being sold as hemp, no more vape bars calling themselves wellness centers. They wanted to restore order, or at least restore the illusion that they were restoring order. So they rewrote the definition of hemp to include total tetrahydrocannabinols, which is a new term they made up to mean THC plus THCA plus every other cannabinoid with similar effects. They set container limits. They banned anything synthetic or semi-synthetic. They closed the loophole for seeds from hot plants. They carved up hemp, industrial hemp, intermediate hemp products, and final hemp-derived cannabinoid products. The message was pretty clear. Party's over, new sheriff in town. But here's where the mystery starts. Because as you read deeper into the new definition, you notice something strange. Congress spent pages regulating what people consume, gummies, beverages, vapes, tinctures, extracts, oils, but barely touched what people grow after it is a seed. And the more you look, the more obvious it becomes. This bill wasn't written by growers. It wasn't written by anyone who's ever held a cannabis plant in their hands. It was written by people who think cannabis comes from the same factory that makes gummy bears. And that's when you stumble across a line that should stop you cold. Let's go to HR 5371 in the definition. It says, in general, the term hemp means the plant Cannabis sativa L and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a total tetrahydrocannabinols concentration, including THCA, of not more than 0.3 on a dry weight basis. Any part of the plant. That phrase is doing a lot of work because Congress thinks that any part of the plant means fiber, seeds, stalks. If we go down to the inclusions portions of the definition for industrial hemp, we can see that it says hemp grown for the use of this stalk, the plant, the fiber, or other non-cannabinoid derivative mixture or preparation or manufacture of such stalk. But in botany and in law, any part of the plant means every living piece of it, including the one thing Congress never mentioned once, the one thing that determines everything about the future of cannabis production, the one thing that has no intoxicating effect at the point of sale but becomes intoxicating perhaps, depending on how it's grown in the future. And that is the thing. The next loophole being clones. Vegetative cuttings, mother stock, tissue cultures, baby cannabis plants that haven't developed yet, plants that test well below 0.3% total THC because they're too young to have made any, plants that every commercial grower in the country relies on. Congress never mentioned clones once, and we can imply that was intentional. They never restricted clones. They never set THC limits for future potency other than seeds. They only set limits for what the plant is now at the moment it's tested. However, they do mention microgreens. Under the industrial hemp provision, they say those must have been grown from compliant seed, the definition states. Producing microgreens or other edible hemp leaf products intended for human consumption that are derived from an immature hemp plant that is grown for seeds that do not exceed the threshold for total tetrahydrocannabinol concentrations. So your microgreens have to be grown from THC-compliant seeds. But the definition of hemp does not say that it has to be from a THC-compliant seed. Instead, seeds are banned as under the exclusions from hemp, it says any viable seeds from a cannabis sativa L plant that exceeds a total THC concentration, including THCA, of 0.3% in the plant on a dry weight basis. So what does that mean after you pop a seed? Well, if you intended to eat as microgreens, you have to grow it from a THC-compliant seed, but what if you intend to clone it? It seems that once the seed is popped and you do not market it for food, you have hemp. Because hemp is not categorized as the type of cultivar you have, only cannabis without total THC. Clones, therefore, should be hemp. It tests clean, it meets the definition, it's harmless. It is, in every legal sense, hemp. But that same clone, after 8 weeks, under 12-hour light-dark cycles, after nutrients and careful cultivation and flowering, that plant becomes the exact high THCA cannabis Congress insists it never intended to legalize. And of course, this is the center of the mystery. Congress didn't close the loophole. They changed the loophole. They moved it upstream into the biology of the plant itself. They wiped out the cannabinoid product loophole and replaced it with the federally legal plant genetics highway. Loophole version 1.0 was sell intoxicating products that technically meet the definition of hemp. Loophole version 2.0, the one Congress just created, is sell the plant that will eventually make the intoxicating product. Think about how wild that is. Congress says, we are banning intoxicating hemp products. We are cleaning up the hemp market. We are protecting consumers. Then the next breath was, but yes, of course, you can grow tiny hemp leaves to put on your avocado toast if it's from compliant seeds, because high THC seeds are banned and make marijuana. But then when you read the definition, the genetic material that becomes the entire commercial cannabis market, not a word. No restriction on clones, no limits. Not even a hint that they remembered clones exists or tissue cultures or mothers. This wasn't just an oversight. This is what happens when the law is written by people who think cannabis is made in a factory. They understand gummies and pre-rolls. They understand beverages. They understand vapes. They can picture packaging and child-proof lids and THC symbols, the flavor names, the lawsuits, the headlines. They cannot picture, it seems, a tray of clones or a tissue culture lab or a mother plant in a vegetative room or anything involving horticulture beyond a cartoon marijuana leaf. And that brings us to the heart of this mystery, the moment where all the clues line up. A clone has no intoxicating effect at the time of sale. A clone tests under 0.3% total THC. A clone is not an intermediate hemp product. A clone is not a final hemp-derived cannabinoid product. A clone is not eaten, smoked, vaped, or ingested. A clone is simply a baby cannabis plant. And all cannabis that's THC compliant is hemp. Under the new federal definition, that plant is hemp if it tests cleans on that day. Tomorrow, when it's flowering, when its THC levels surge in the 6th through 8th weeks of flower, that's no longer a federal hemp issue, that's state marijuana law. But wait, Congress shut down the hemp product loophole. Maybe we should see if clones or tissue cultures or mothers are covered by one of the other exclusions besides seeds. What about hemp-derived cannabinoid products? Congress defined a hemp-derived cannabinoid product as any intermediate or final product derived from hemp intended for human or animal use through inhalation, ingestion, or topical application. Well, that's gummies, vapes, oils, beverages, anything you use. A clone does none of that. A clone is not consumed or inhaled or absorbed or applied to anything. A clone is just a living plant. It's not a cannabinoid product in intermediate or in final use, and it's not intended for human or animal use. Its flowers will eventually be intended for human or animal use. So let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to the other subcategory that Congress created, an intermediate hemp-derived cannabinoid product. Basically a pre-finished ingredient designed for a consumable end product. That definition requires two elements. It must be a product, not a plant, and it must be something that will be mixed, dissolved, formulated, or prepared into another consumable. So the clone fails both tests. A clone is not a powder, liquid, oil, tablet, or extract. It is not prepared with anything. It is not marketed or sold as a final product for ingestion. And none of its ingredients are cannabinoids. It's not a gummy recipe. It is not an intermediate biomass. It's not extractable crude. It is a baby plant. So we're back to where we were in the loophole. And it means that something enormous is going to happen or continue to happen in the cannabis industry, something that almost no one is talking about except for Jason Adelstone on the Canna Law blog. Interstate movement of genetics, the holy grail of cannabis commerce, is effectively still legalized for any cultivar whose clone tests clean at shipment. They have just flipped it from seeds to clones or tissue cultures. The clone has no measurable THC at the moment it's shipped. It's hemp, and you can ship hemp. That's not stretching the definition. That's the literal definition that Congress passed twice. Now, let's talk about why this loophole will probably last for another 5 to 7 years. First, no voter cares about clones. Nobody is protesting the plant cuttings. There's no fear-mongering headlines about children exposed to dangerous, well-rooted rock wool cubes. Second, enforcement will require Congress to invent a regulatory framework for future potency. And they aren't going to do that. You can't get Congress to pass a budget without shutting down. Third, the definition is now baked into the Farm Bill cycle. Hemp doesn't get rewritten every year. It may get rewritten every half decade, if at all. Congress doesn't need to change the definition of hemp, or corn for that matter, every 5 years, but it can. And finally, this loophole actually solves a political problem. Congress gets to say they cracked down on intoxicating hemp products. They did. But they also quietly enabled the cannabis industry to continue to have what it had under the seed loophole previously: federally legal movement of commercial genetics. So here's the truth. Congress will never say out loud they didn't legalize baby cannabis. They made it illegal to get high from gas station gummies, while making it perfectly legal to order a box of federally compliant hemp clones and grow your own. That's the new loophole. This is the mystery solved. This is what's coming over the next decade. And this channel is going to keep breaking down every one of these cracks in prohibition until the whole structure falls apart. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do. Join over 80,000 advocates pushing toward 100,000, because when we hit that milestone, Washington will know the cannabis community is not just watching, we are keeping score. And unlike Congress, we actually read the bills. So we know what happens after you pop the seed. Tune into this next video starting right now.